probably need to be agreed at some point to get to the end. I've lost all the pages. So, yeah, next question is, are there any particular subcommittees or working groups that we want to recommend to be instantiated from the outset? The obvious one here would be the budget working group. We encourage that to be instantiated from the outset. Does anyone have any gripes with that? That we would suggest it would be a working group? I'll take hands, might as well. Finance working group, who likes that, who supports that?
I mean, only as obviously as a strong guy.
Yeah, as a strong guy. Yeah, as an assumption.
But,
yes.
But with the proviso that, I think, Jack, you said this, that all of the committees will have to take a responsibility both for the budget and I would suggest
so
kind of performance monitoring, which
yeah,
might
so
help
that was my next
when they come on to
one,
setting their work programme. You know, it makes sense for people to look at things that are underperforming, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I think that's just the next thing to go on to. I'll go this way around this time. Jeff, and then.
Yeah, I mean, following on from that, I'm torn because committees have to have responsibility for their budget because they're the decision makers. But I'm also aware that we had problems years ago when departments were effectively running their own budgets and no one was centrally controlling it, and therefore we do need the service committee delivering the service, but we actually need a central function that is holding the budget and holding the committees to account.
But won't that be strategy and resources?
Yeah.
Well, so.
And that's where the challenges come in, because so to me, the benefit of this working group that we've had the last 4 or 5 years is the incredible level of openness we've had from finance officers to share with backbenchers. And I see that the role for that carrying on in some form is potentially very helpful. It's an exemplary form of scrutiny as it's happened already, and it would be madness for us to lose that in the decision-making process. But we perhaps also need to establish, who is ultimately responsible for the budget and finance. Is that going to be the leader or deputy leader who ultimately have that role? I think that accountability is really important because the working group is not going to be an executive group, it's going to be a sounding board, so there has to be some clarity on who is leading. And I'm guessing that one of those two would be expected to have that role, but we need to clarify.
Yeah, Tim just wants to come in on that.
I'm happy to wait till other councils have commented. I've got a few technical points to raise, if I may.
Well,
was directly related to that.
okay, I did have Gary next.
Yes,
so.
apologies.
I basically, I partly agree with Jen, and basically, having had experience in family before, it's fine when you look at your budget within your area, but you've got to know that the distribution of the budget to different areas is affected. I don't necessarily agree that, if one person or two people correctly make that decision, but we do have to work out a method by which that decision is come to. And there are various ways it can actually be done, but we've got to be clear which one we support.
Nicola, and then I've got one.
So I think the committees will be responsible for their budgets in year and recommendations for setting the following year's budget. The Strategy and Resources Committee is accountable for the delivery of full council budget decision, and the chair of that committee is the leader of the council, which we talked about before. Then ultimately the chair of that committee is accountable for the safe delivery of the decision made from council. council. So that answers Jeff's point about the link to council, but then it would be completely perverse to me that those individual committees are free to make decisions unshackled by the constraints of the budget, because that is where you get into serious trouble. So there needs to be a responsibility at committee level, as you would with your own money in your own bank. Do you know? Like, you were responsible for that, and I think that's where URAC would work with the R and the A.
Yeah, I have one short point which is related. So the main issue, so I agree that the proposal should be something like finance committee is a subcommittee instantiated by the strategy, policy and resources wireless broadband. The main thing I want to bring up is that other authorities we spoke to said that chairing that group should not be done by full council's chair because it was too much work. So that subcommittee,
Full council's chaired by the law board.
oh sorry,
Leader.
the leader.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So the leader of, who's also the chair of the strategy, I think that's where my head was going, shouldn't also be chairing that subcommittee.
That's okay.
Yeah, so that subcommittee will get to elect its own chair, but the strategy and resources subcommittee are, they're doing, the strategy and resources committee are responsible for the work of the subcommittee, and then they're responsible to full council. I think that's the order of accountability. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay.
Does that mean it was only composed of strategy and resources members?
No, subcommittees don't have to be made of only committee members. Yeah, they're in hierarchy.
Okay.
I guess that's the point, that their responsibility is delegated down. Tim, technical points.
Yeah, and I just want to reinforce some of the things that councillors have said here, because this comes down to key parts of good governance within the authority, and we need to be absolutely on it in terms of making sure we get it right. Yes, as Nicholas said, we have the budget and policy framework set by full council, and any decisions, whether taken by policy and resources or one of the other, strategy and resources or one of the other policy committees, has to be in accordance with that budget and policy framework. Now, you might want to carve out specific functions of a finance nature that would sit with strategy and resources, and I'm thinking of things like oversight of our reserves policy, things like treasury management, some of the more strategic matters that currently go through and are approved by Cabinet, but you wouldn't necessarily want them going to all of the policy committees where, as I think the consensus seems to be, decisions in line with the policy, budget and policy framework and oversight of service budgets. And I think that there is some work that we need to do to reflect upon all of that and align what is currently done on the finance, because it's not just about budget development and oversight of budgets. It's a lot wider than that in some respects, and it does align to a certain degree with what audit does as well. So there's a way of mapping all of that. But I just wanted to make that clear that I think that there does need to be a recognition that some of the more strategic finance, as well as the overall oversight, does need to be done by strategy and resources.
Shall we take a quick vote on that specific point, or do we want a debate first? So does anyone have any comments? I'll just invite comments about the strategic level budgetary setting going to strategy and resources policy committee. Does anyone have any particular comments that they want to raise?
Well, the budget will be set for council, but
Yes.
nuance around policy to do with reserves and treasury. The
The
flexibility
financial
within the budget.
responsibility, general stuff should go to that committee. Specifically, there's a budget subcommittee annually. Gareth.
We have to take into account the evolving responsibilities for the different committees. Therefore, if a chunk of work wasn't there, we would have the structure to be able to move the budget from committee A to committee B.
Yeah, I guess that's something we acknowledge, yeah. Okay, I'll take an indicative,
So my only, if you're going to form this into words that we vote on, I think we just need to make sure we twin the budget oversight and committee performance, as Helen said, so those two things are hand in hand, so we can see the outcomes that the spending of that budget is pursuing. And so if you're going to, I was just in case you're
Yeah.
turning it into
Well, that's a
something
good
that we
point,
want,
actually.
the
So we
performance and
haven't,
budget
we
need to
haven't
be
had a
together.
separate discussion, which I was going to quickly go to about performance and risk management. But yeah.
Because you can spend lots of money, so if you're not getting the outcome,
Yeah,
I would
correct.
say you failed.
Can I ask if others are imagining that strategy and resources committee is likely to be the chairs of? I know that it doesn't have to. I know that we're not making anything chairs, but from my understanding of how it would work, when you're discussing about someone going in that has that responsibility for the other committees, and when you're talking about the budget monitoring, and someone that would be going in. If the members of that committee are able to go in and report on what is going on within their own committee, I can just see that working so much better. And also the discussions about what is, what is the bigger budget question. You need to have those voices from each of those other committees in there.
I think last time we sort of decided that it wasn't all the chairs because we decided that would make it too large. But I will also take a debate on that in a minute. Do you think that will unduly affect how you vote in the vote I was about to take relating to the responsibility of strategic budget stuff?
No, and to be honest, I think that the difficult question there is about how we are likely to allocate chairs between parties. And I'm not sure that is something that we're ever going to agree a policy on. It's more each and every party, depending on how we do next year, might decide that. So I realise that it's not easy to have something that would agree on that, but just it's important to consider it.
Okay. Once again, I'm a little bit too, the meeting's gone on too long to formulate this very well cut. So, I guess do you have a point, Lorraine? Sorry.
Budget is probably my weakest area.
Yeah.
So I've got questions, so do forgive me a bit really stupid if I'm saying that out loud. I think I just want to be sure and clear that I'm not going to answer that bit of my question. I think the bit of my question is I want to vocalise actually because I've changed my thought as I'm describing the process was about have we considered how we manage the cross-budget issues that will come up? It's just a question.
Well, that's what.
Is that what we're
So
going
we're
to...
sort of about to vote. So I'll try and frame it now then. Tim alluded to a number of matters.
Yes, I heard.
Sort of corporate financey matters.
Yeah.
That's the best way of putting it. And I think that what we want to vote on now is that stuff that's within the scope of corporate finance would be handled by the Strategy and Resources Committee, and each of the committees would then in year have its own budget that it would work to. Does that make sense? So that overall,
Yes, it does make sense.
yeah.
And so where would my naive question fit into that? Because I'm just curious.
Well, I suppose
about
the answer to your question is that it would then be handled by Strategy and Resources Committee. All of those issues would come up there, I think.
And we don't know who will make up the strategies and resources committee based upon that.
No,
I'm just like, so that's why it's complicated.
we'll debate that in a sec, if that's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Let Nicola come in. Yeah.
Just to reassure you, Lorraine,
Yeah.
I suspect about 80% of the question will get answered, and there'll be this kind of 20% of budgetary matters, which is non-statutory,
Yeah.
which could sit in one committee or another. But often, I guess, take transport as a good example. has a massive public health lens to it, but the budget holder would be transport, but public health would feed into that strategy. Does that make sense? So I think, but all the statutory spend will sit in a committee. It will just fall, you know, into the buckets, and I think it's that last nutty bit, which I guess, as you say, the strategy committee would determine where it's best placed based on a whole number of metrics. You know, there'll be all sorts of considerations that play into that, but I think we need to be mindful and not to complicate this discussion any further, that because a budget, take the transport example, is sat in transport, they have a duty to work with those other committees or members of the, you might end up with a transport lead on the, for instance, you could have a transport lead on the public health committee who brings that public health view into a transport decision. Does that make sense? It may work like that in a matrix in practice.
Yeah.
So I'm quite relaxed about it, but it wasn't a naive question because this stuff does cross-fertilise. That's
Yeah.
the whole point.
Thanks. Okay, let's do a quick vote on this then. So, yeah, corporate finance, oh, do you have a
I
question?
just wanted to clarify, apologies, my difficult brain. I thought Councillor Beach mentioned something about where performance
No,
management.
we're going to talk about that
later.
We're going to talk
Fine,
about that
apologies.
Okay.
Places.
Corporate finance will largely be handled by strategy and resources. All in favour? Yeah, great. So the next question, I do want to get clarity on this question of how are the chairs going to meet? So my suggestion is actually, I think, what maybe Jeff was suggesting a while ago, but slightly different. And I did look this up as well, and it seems to be a normal thing that the Strategy and Resources Committee is just like all the other committees. It's just made up of whoever wants to sit on it. And the chairs have a separate meeting which functions similarly to how OSM currently sets work throughout the year, and it will continue having those meetings where this is obviously operational. I think we'd suggest that the chairs have a meeting that isn't a decision-making meeting but is more like a forward planning meeting. That's my starting point idea.
Well, I'll say something very unpopular, but it is the truth anyway. And this will be a meeting convened by the leader. It will be an informal meeting with senior officers and the chairs of the committee. So if you don't have that operating, the system will just grind down. So admittedly, all public decisions have to be made in public in committee meetings. But we all know there's 1,000 other decisions and steers and guides, and you'll have to have that conversation between senior officers and committee chairs, and sometimes they all have to be in a room. Some of those meetings might involve the vice chairs as well. We've talked about, you know, this new way of working, we would like to see different parties in the room, and hopefully that might be something we can organise. But that would be something which I would have thought probably happens at least fortnightly, possibly weekly. I mean, in reality, does it happen weekly at the moment? Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, and that's probably how it will work. And that doesn't mean that we're going back to a mayoral model or anything like that, but the reality is you cannot do all the business in committee meetings. There's 1,000 other things, discussions that have to occur.
Yeah, so it's effectively like an agenda setting meeting.
Yes, but run by the leader, the chief executive, you have the senior officers in, and that's where you deal with your committee's £2 million overspend this month. What we're going to do about this, because that's going to happen quite a bit.
Ideas. Okay, I'm going this way around this time. So, Nat and Holland. Okay.
So I agree that that work has to happen, and I agree with this, probably agree with the format of that happening. I think my concern is that there's this massive unknown at the moment in terms of what the political makeup of the council will be, and based on that, what political makeup of chairs will be. Like and we're trying to answer what the structure looks like when I don't think any of us are going to sit down and commit to, well, our party, if we had the largest group, would do exactly this. I have a concern that if you have one political makeup, one group of members of the strategy and resources who are deciding this is the direction we're going, this is what we're trying to achieve, and then you have a different group of people and a different political makeup in this chairs and agenda setting, that they might just filibuster the work. You know, if they're not aligned to each other, and if they do end up with different political makeup, that the agenda setting could just say, well, actually, no, we don't want to put your priorities from the strategy. I know I'm being very pessimistic here. Everyone can tell me I'm being very pessimistic and that's not going to happen.
No, it's a good point, and I think the answer is that you're right. The committees have to decide what work they're going to do, and then the chairs have a responsibility to say, right, we're intending to do some work on this thing, so I need you and you to also be involved in that. Is that way round that the chairs are given the power to talk about what the committee is going to do with each other and get that?
If strategy and resources and the leader have led to a different focus to what the committees are agreeing to. I mean, I really hope that this won't be the situation, but I don't really know what the solution to stop this filibustering would be, but I'm just saying what the situation could be, especially if there's a very close political mix and one is dominated by one party and the other one isn't dominated by that party.
Yeah, I think it's a fair possibility. So, yeah, I think I had Holland and Councillor Holland and then Councillor Goller.
I think it sort of follows Heather's point, because the Strategy and Resources Committee will have to be politically proportionate, won't it?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know what the makeup of the chairs will be. However, I do think that it would be down to party groups when they're nominating their people to Strategy and Resources. If they've got people who are chairs of committees, they might well want those people to be on it, to bring those things closer together. Because I think that you're right, that the chances, were Strategy and Resources to be made up of backbenchers who weren't familiar with the work of a particular committee or had the responsibility around that particular. But that won't necessarily work, will it? Mapping it across about what the makeup of the council is, which, as you say, we've got no idea at the moment. So I just think that there's going to be a bit of a mismatch between the Strategy and Resources Committee membership and committee chairs. But I think Tim is also right, and he's been involved in that. And if I go back to pre-2000, we used to have a meeting called Leaders Briefing every Friday morning when Graham Robertson, George McGraw, whoever they were at the time, sat with all the committee chairs. So what Tim says is absolutely right.
Quick technical.
Is it possible for us to do something that it's not a decision, it's not a thing that could be policy, but it is a point of view of this group, which is exactly what Helen said, that we can't set that as policy, it's going to be up to each of our party political leadership in a year's time. But that actually it might be the view of this group that having that strategy and resources being made up where possible of chairs would help.
I think that we can say that
and have that
individual councillors can say that is a view that was expressed, but I think it's so far detached that we're just going to have to take that forward on a group level more than anything else. I'm going to move on to Councillor Goller.
So, we are going to guess at how council might be made up, but it seems to me that even if there is a largest group that is a controlling group, it would be likely that group is going to want to try and negotiate the majority of the chairs of committee. So that would seem a probability. Now, I think I'm with what Helen was saying in that the idea of a committee of chairs making one set of decisions and a resources and strategy group which is proportionate, not necessarily agreeing with that, I think could be fractious and wasting a lot of time.
Well, I suppose
whereas
decision-making.
Helen's decision of the leaders' briefing sort of gathering for discussion to resolve the issues that need to be sorted to make the council function, I have no problem. But anything that develops further than that could end up with a friction between the strategy and resources and the committee group. Come back to, if the majority of the chairs are from one party, the size of that policy and strategy and resources committee to make it proportionate could be far too large. But there are other mechanisms, and one can look at the possibility that if you have the controlling group having more councillors on that committee than the other parties, but there's no reason why the other chairs cannot be either invited along or co-opted non-voting. Yeah, but we're about engaging and listening and sharing, and if we're doing this in a constructive way, we are going to need the right people. If we're doing it in a confrontational way, this isn't going to work whatever system we have. So actually, we've got to set an ethos in what we're doing that talks about working and sharing and developing to try and get the best outcomes. And if we work it in that way, then to be honest, if the strategy and resources is chaired by the leader, that in itself is providing the coordination, because the person who's making a lot of decisions is there doing. So I think there's an element we can get too strung up about all the different variations. What we have to make sure is that we have an approach that's capable of making timely and clear and transparent decisions.
Yeah.
Not
right.
Where things get referred on to different places for decisions to be.
So I need to draw us to a close soon, and I've got two more hands. I've got Councillor Hopkins and Francis. So if you two can make your points quickly, and then I think I'm going to try and bring us into, because this is a recommendation as opposed to a vote as well. So no, that's not true. The vote will be on policy and resources, or strategy and resources rather, being not made of the chairs, and then we'll come up with a suggestion that there be some sort of chairs meetings convened separately. So that's the vote I think I'm going to take. That's the direction. So comments on that, I guess. So I'm going to go to Gary and then you, Lorraine.
I see the strategy resources being more mechanical, to basically check whether things happen properly the way there's been agreed, rather than necessarily doing all the decision making. So a lot of that decision making is, as Tim said, it's going to be a leader with key people sitting down and having those discussions. I think the key thing it actually is that those discussions are not in public, but it's important that everybody who needs to know, does know what happened. So we used to have cabinet meetings that were discussions, and then afterwards you have the open cabinet meeting where, after discussions have happened, put everything that's been agreed in the public way. And the mechanism for making certain of those informal discussions, Garage council should know, and need to know, is important.
All right, thank you. And Lorraine, I really want to move us to a vote soon. So if people are okay, go on, Lorraine.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about the vote.
Okay.
So that's just one point. I don't know if there's a lot of people. I think have we had enough time? You might shoot me down now. Had enough time to make sense of this. I think we are slightly making it more complicated, but I think some of the things Jeff said, some of the things Heather said about we want to move into a system where we are all collaborative. That's what the community system is about. So how do we protect that? Because it doesn't matter who has the majority, there's something about how we're going to work proportionally together to make the system fair. I don't care whether the Greens have 1 or 50 people, do you know what I mean? It's 50 members. We have to make sure that we are working collaboratively, and we shouldn't, no party should dominate the process. But I'm probably not saying that correctly, but there is something about how we are going to try somewhere that whoever is the majority or that we are working collaboratively. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a bit worried about a vote where we're going to vote about it, but I guess do we have to vote about it?
I think we need a decision on who's on strategy and resources, whether it's chairs or not. I think we need to. We can decide that. whether it's necessarily chairs. Like, do we want a 16-person committee that is made up of chairs and vice chairs and all that, or do we think we'll just leave it to all the groups and it's made up in the same way that all of the other committees are made up?
Yeah, that would be fair, the latter.
Yeah, that was what I was going to take about.
Hybrid solution.
Yeah. Hang on, not hybrid. So.
Well, it is, because some of them will be chairs and some of them
Yeah,
won't.
yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, so chairs if you like, but the non-mandatory chairs meeting. Is that okay? I'm going to take a vote.
Is that related to agreeing that there'll be another meeting of chairs though? Because I think they are related.
Well, and then we would say that further work will be done on the protocols for how the chairs are briefed and how they discuss, but that they won't be able to have their own formal decision-making meeting, because that wouldn't be a balanced committee. That would be a separate committee. So they won't be able to do formal decision-making in public.
If we agree this,
then that would be something we're also agreeing.
Yeah.
So, does everyone understand what I just said? I made Lorraine upset. No, does everyone understand what I just said? No?
Just for a point of clarification,
Yeah.
one of the things that was under General Item 6, which we didn't really cover in that much detail, but was performance as part of strategy resources. Right?
That was my next point. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, so
Yeah.
clarification around this would be good, because are we potentially opening ourselves to a situation where some members of the Strategy Resources Committee are responsible for scrutinising the performance of their own committee and some aren't?
That's a really
Good
good
point.
point.
So can I give you my take on that? And Clive mentioned it in his statement. The audit committee is responsible for ensuring that risk is being assessed, but isn't actually taking the decisions. The decisions have got to be taken on risk, and the performance has got to be monitored, in my view, by the individual committees. I can't see that, so they've got to be monitoring, because they're the ones actually making the decisions. So they've got to monitor it. So I would see that resources and strategy would have an interest along with audit committee in identifying where those performances weren't being achieved properly, to find out what was being done to resolve it. But I would see those questions have got to actually be asked in the individual committees. Because, you can have that committee asking a question, if the chair isn't present, there's no one there to actually respond on behalf of that committee. It's got to happen in the individual committee.
Sorry, Guy, do you want someone else to answer?
I'll tell you what it is, Jack, if I may, and I'll be as quick as I can be. But at the end of the day, my working on this committee comes back to what is in my mailbox from day to day from my board, and it's not policy, consistently it's delivery. That's the thing my residents complain to me about the most. It isn't what is our policy on HMOs, what is our policy on part-time, it's our failure to enforce these policies. Right? So how does that scrutiny happen under this arrangement? If the people deciding what our policy is sit on a committee in splendid isolation, and the actual problem is being dealt with by a chair of that committee who also is in effect chairing the creation of that policy, assessing its performance, scrutinising its performance, and potentially exercising judicial functions over it as well. And the only other thing that comes to is escalation plan. There's a problem there.
Yeah.
So I need apologies, I need to get my head around the implications of this for that problem.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable point.
Can I come back? Because my take on that would be as a member of that committee, if you feel that it's an issue, you would be pushing for that item to be on the agenda of your committee.
With the chair
And-
deciding.
No, the chair doesn't decide, the committee decides
The committee can't, the chair can't veto the agenda, and if even a chair who might not agree with what, say, you were trying to say, if the performance report shows an appalling performance, the committee would be demanding that it's there, and if that was being manipulated to not be there, then actually at that point I would expect resources and strategy to be intervening and actually saying this is a critical issue and you're not delivering on it. So there's got to be that element of challenge, but the committees themselves will determine their agenda and what they actually look at and question.
We do have escalation.
Yeah.
And there would also be escalation as well.
Okay, in which case, I suppose what I'm asking for is reassurance from I guess, from as the monitoring officer, right? There wouldn't be a situation where a committee wanted to look at, say, an area of performance or an area of delivery, only to have a direction or advice from officers to say, apologies, that's to do with performance or delivery, that's a matter for strategy and resources. That wouldn't come in.
The fallback position for any committee would be that two members of that committee, as per our current procedure rules, would be able to call an extraordinary meeting to debate the relevant matter. So you've got a safeguard built in any event that you weren't able to agree it through the normal process of
That's
agenda
right,
planning,
Steve.
work programming, etc.
Okay, and in which case, just to complete the thought though, because I'm quite happy with that, that also deals with aldermen's? No, former councillor Clive Stevens' point about minority reports.
Yeah, it does.
Just call it in, you don't need to you
Yeah.
can write something down, absolutely, but it has teeth, in other words,
Yeah.
Councillor Stevens' minority report.
Okay.
Right.
I think this has all come together.
Okay.
Do you have, I know, because I really do want to
Pardon?
take the
No.
vote.
No, are we still voting?
This vote, we didn't vote. So this does have repercussions on, like, as I was saying, so we're going to take a vote, which is that strategy and resources isn't exclusively made up of chairs by, like, mandatory, it's nature mandatory, though it may have chairs from other committees on it. And what was the consequence? That we will also come up with protocols for how chairs are briefed and how they talk to each other and how cross-cutting decisions and areas where there might be conflict are discussed and developed.
Can I just clarify something before we vote on that about
Yeah.
those processes? Because surely those are things that haven't come into the constitution about
No,
how
but the
chairs
point
do
is that I'm saying that we will vote that someone starts looking at that and suggests some things that then, when there is the committee system, obviously it's the chairs who are going to have to agree to go to a meeting or whatever, but officers will need to say, here's briefing and whatever, set that up basically. Yeah.
Can you have a terms of reference of an unconstituted group? I think the answer. So you've got a group of chairs that meet, and that could have an agreed terms of reference despite it not being a decision-making group. I
So
assume
that would have to be voted on by full council.
No, the group could but that's
I'm
important.
going to take the vote unless anyone is completely confused about what we're voting on.
Then we just take the second half of what you said out. Because it's
Okay,
not, it's not a
fine.
constitutional matter.
Well, I'm
That's
saying
a
that,
political
okay,
matter.
right,
Political
fine. In
groups
that
need to
case,
agree bilaterally, and it's confusing with the conversation.
okay, right, we'll take that out. So, but that is basically the consequence.
That is the understood consequence.
That is the understood consequence. Okay, yeah, chairs don't have to be on strategy and resources. All in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Okay, that's everyone. Okay, yeah, we've got time for a very, very short discussion about performance and risk, specifically. I do think we've covered some of it. So, go on.
So at the very beginning of this item, you mentioned are there any subgroups that you think we need to retain? It's not for discussion today, but should we get a sound local plan, which we obviously hope to, I would like to retain the working group, albeit under another name, to talk about the plethora of subsequent SPDs and policy that we require, and that would probably report to that strategy group. We don't need to discuss it here, I'm happy to discuss it somewhere else, but it's cross-party, and I think all the things Jeff talked about, a budget group being very positive, it enshrines all of that, and actually, the local plan will not solve our planning issues, is what I'm saying. There are many more, and we need to be agile, and that we'll talk about later, but can we just look at the fact that I'd like to do that.
Okay. That's fair enough. Performance and risk. Yeah, okay. Performance and risk stuff. So, yeah, are there any resolutions that people would like to make relating to performance and risk? Yeah?
The committee should take the lead and responsibility on performance and risk.
Yes. Yes.
There's nothing wrong
Right.
with the...
Hands.
Hold on.
Hands up on that one.
Hang on,
Oh.
sorry.
There's nothing wrong with the strategy group having an oversight, but ultimately full council anyway has an oversight,
Yeah.
so we don't need to overly complicate things. Ultimately, they should take the lead on that, because clearly the control of the budgets, judge of policy, they should also be in charge of the delivery. And I'm sure we can put in ways to make sure they're held to account if they don't.
Okay.
Okay. Guy, you're...
No, sorry, I'm still trying to pull this together.
So just for the minutes, you mentioned earlier about the SNR committee identifying performance and achievements, providing recommendations. Is that included, or is it just that risk and performance should be considered by individual committees making decisions?
So you use acronyms there.
Oh, strategy resources. Sorry.
Right, but I could see there's a place where, you know, they can pull out individual things, say, hey, what's going on, but ultimately, from day one, the committee should take responsibility,
Yeah.
and we're all, anyway, beholden to full council.
Yeah. And I think there would probably be some like miscellaneous strategy / resource performance things that they will also take. So I've got...
Well, they'll deal with corporate risk.
Yeah, corporate risks.
Yes.
That's
But all the
yeah.
rest would be
Yeah, put in the committees.
And someone has to have overall control, of course, of the risk plan, and I guess that
That's
potentially with that strategy resources committee, but the day-to-day performance of each committee should be responsible for. And again, held to account by full council and the public.
Does anyone have any disagreements or things they're not clear on?
No.
Right, okay. Let's vote on Tim's proposal. All in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Abstained? Are you abstaining against?
No.
Yeah, 11.
No, I'm not abstaining, sorry, I am voting for.
Voting.
Sorry.
All right. Okay, great.
For being clear.
Okay.
Chair, just one point on that. We're all in agreement. This seems to me, if we're making guidelines and comments as we go, that we ought to ask that the quarterly performance report and updates on the risk register, along with financial monitors, should actually be provided for information to the committees each when they meet at
I
appropriate
think
times.
that's
So we ought to establish that as the process now, rather than
Yeah.
suddenly find 2 years in that. No one
So we forgot to look at
do
them.
it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So quarterly corporate reports on risk and performance will be sent coordinating.
I just had a quick point, if that's all right, Chair. I just wanted to say what I was going to say before, and I didn't say, was about, and I'm not opening up anything, I'm just saying, roles and responsibilities of chairs and members should hopefully incorporate some of the stuff that we talked about anyway, you know, like concerns about how we function, you know, the role of the chair, that the chair is there to dictate to the rest of the group about stuff. So just, obviously, it's an obvious point, I think. As in, yeah,
Right.
that's important.
End of item. Next item. I hope that we covered everything. I don't know. Next item, roles and responsibilities. Oh, sorry, do you have something else,
I
Guy?
just wanted to add one thing, because without labouring the point or raising this again, I would argue that A, are there any subcommittees or working groups that should be established in the outset, and the assumption area committees are a subcommittee, not necessarily actually so delegates decision-making authority. I would like to put on the record that that's something that will be discussed next time. I don't want to let it go past and go, no, there are no additional subcommittees. I can think of hundreds of subcommittees we should have, right?
I think the thing is though, that they're only, the point is that they're only a suggestion, and the only reason that we discussed the finance one in detail is because we felt it's like sufficiently important. Obviously there are a lot of subcommittees. I think that we can maybe go and make a suggestion that in July we programme some point to make a list of suggested subcommittees that, and working groups that we might want to then suggest to the next year, but it obviously is up to those committees to devolve into subcommittees themselves. So we'd only be making recommendations at some point.
Yeah, so we've already agreed that policy committees can create subcommittees. The question really for today was whether they're, from the outset we have some standing subcommittees that we recognise, irrespective of the ability for subcommittees to be created generally, that we know that we're going to need them. And you know, the finance one is the obvious one.
Yeah,
You know,
but I think the point that the guy's making is that let's come back to them maybe at some point.
There may be
after
other standing
July.
committees that we want to, that we also
So
want to
that's a
establish.
really good catch, thank you. Right, so roles and responsibilities and definitions of councillor stuff. Got to find the paper. Yeah, introduce that please, thanks Tim.
This report covers off roles and responsibilities of councillors, and it starts with really the key responsibilities of all councillors, and then it goes into detail for the specific roles. This is not something that we currently have, but I think it's going to be extremely useful for us going forward. If I'm honest, it's probably a gap in our current constitution in terms of articulating what roles and responsibilities are for councillors and for those with specific responsibilities. We've covered off every potential role that we think will exist under the new arrangements. There may be one or two other things that we need to think about, but we've done quite a lot of research in arriving at the document that you've got here today. This is not dissimilar to the way that other councils, whether they're operating a committee model or leader and cabinet model or mayoral model, would articulate these sorts of roles. So, I'll be honest, we haven't reinvented the wheel here, Chair, but we have reviewed what's done elsewhere and taken the learning from that and produced something that hopefully is a benefit for the working group. And I'll leave it at that, because I think the discussion is probably more important than going through the detail personally.
I've got a hand from Guy.
A question statement probably, but it's going to Tim. There are certain duties and responsibilities of councils that aren't enunciated here, and I'm saying about some of them, like for example corporate parenting, or like the public sector equality duty, which applies to us corporately but also applies to us individually, and that's like making decisions. They're not reflected here, but equally they're kind of, I don't know where they would appear.
Yeah.
And I also don't know how many there are. There may be hundreds I'm not aware of because of the different roles might not have covered some of them. And I would be very interested in your kind of reflections on that, of these things that don't belong here because they're somewhere else, or are they covered through a general kind of clause in this role. I haven't checked the appendix and the main body, and I can see either of those two as well, but equally they may be covered by something else.
I suppose the first one says, to fulfil the statutory and locally determined requirements of an elected member, one of which is to be a corporate parent. So, they are written in fairly broad terms, and we could produce 4 or 5 pages, and that probably isn't a benefit to councillors or to members of the public. They are deliberately written in broad general terms, but hopefully with enough to capture most eventualities.
So I suppose that takes us into the questions that people had about known principles, where we've got to, let's see where it is. Number 8. So to promote and uphold high standards of ethical conduct. Is that do we need to specifically say known principles? Do we want to? Or are we allowed to just say that there are standards? I don't know.
Just adding the line known principles.
Yeah,
So
right.
that-
Yeah.
Shall we all agree that? Okay. Known principles to be added to point 8 of.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah.
I was just to make the point that, yes, duties and responsibilities laid out in Appendix 8 and point 8 in particular is quite broad language, and that's great in that it serves to capture in terms of the language. The challenge is it becomes unenforceable in the breach. Right? And the Nolan principles are notoriously wouldn't be worded, but I would really like to add some teeth to that. I don't think this is the place to do it, but I think if the Nolan principles were part of the code of conduct, and it's referred directly to the code of conduct, then potentially we could actually do a bit of work to establish what the actual enforceability of the Nolan principles could be, enshrine that in the code of conduct, and then ensure that it's really at the core of the role and responsibility of the councillor.
Tim says that the Nolan principles are currently in the code of conduct.
Yes, they are.
So,
But they're very unenforceable.
is the suggestion that 8 therefore refers to promote uphold high standards of ethical conduct, included in line with the code of conduct?
I agree, because there's more in the code of conduct.
Yeah, code of conduct rather than Nolan principles added to point 8 of the first roles and responsibilities of all councillors. Okay. Yes.
And finally, because it could probably add to every section, most job descriptions, I know, within local authorities will say, and any other duties commensurate with the codes. I don't know if that would then be a catch-all or whether that's going to be a terrible thing to put in. Because there was the nuances that might be missed. I don't know. So, just a point.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's necessary.
It might not be necessary. It might not be necessary.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not paying attention to hand order, so I will go. I said I'd go this way round. So Kent Beach, Mackay. Kent Beach, Courtney. Yeah.
So just a very brief one, the roles and responsibilities of political group leaders, so not political group leaders, but the council leader. I don't think it actually states an expectation that they would chair the strategy policy committee. And I think maybe we should work that in, that we were expecting to. We talked about that, with that, what we were expecting. I just think maybe that should be in the list, on the detailed list of the job role.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we don't have it there, why do we keep saying that that will be chaired by the leader?
Suppose so. Anyone in disagreement with that?
No.
No? All right. Councillor Beach.
2 small points. One is I think the committee chairs and vice chairs should be voted on at full council, not on committees. I think the policy chairs and vice chairs should be determined by full council rather than within committees or small lines.
It says that now, they changed
Well, in the description of the project it doesn't say that, sorry.
yeah,
So
we
we just
changed
need a
it all there.
consistency check, apologies.
Okay.
And then the second one, and it's just a plea from me, it doesn't affect me directly at the moment, is that I think there's a conflict between in the scenario where the chair and vice chair are from 2 different parties, which is highly likely, there's often a temptation to bring the vice chair into everything for reasons of accountability and transparency, but that person may not receive an SRA that warrants that. So there's a real challenge if you're the vice chair of something that you end up being brought into loads of conversations, but you're not being remunerated for that, and it's very difficult to manage and unfair. I don't know about this, but in the current arrangement, lots of those vice chairs are women in this council at the moment, and really there's a big equality issue around that. So could we please just make sure when we're assigning the vice chair up to loads of things, we're very mindful of the fact that person is most likely not going to be remunerated in the same way as the
I
chair.
think they will have an SRA.
Yeah, they will have an SRA,
Yeah,
but
not
is
as
it
much?
equitable
Yeah.
to the chair? And so we just need to, it's just a plea, because it's great that we want everyone in the room all the time, but we just need to think about the reality of that person's job.
Great.
And you're right, it's under 6 actually. It's a line under 6 chair of policy committee, which still refers to the committee elected. The vice chair and chair, not council.
Okay.
Spotted.
All right. Right. I'll because I'm going round. I'll go to you.
It was just a technical question. Page 45, under leader of the council, line 3. Should it say councillor? Am I being sick or am I tired? Or should it say leader?
I'm lost.
Line
Sorry,
3.
I don't have the right.
Page 45.
Yeah, I'm on a different document. Chair of Policy Committee. Yeah. What? Sorry.
It says be the key contact for outside organisations, including central government, local authority association, and council partners, and internally for the council's chief officers.
No.
That's item 3.
No. So point 9, page 45.
Can you read it out?
Yeah. Shall I read it?
Yeah.
And then you find it.
Sorry.
It's just saying, I'm going to read, right, I've got to read the whole sentence, otherwise it won't make sense. It says, when the council operates a community system, no formal legal powers and duties are vested in the leader or deputy leader under the Local Government Act, blah, 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 or the Local Government Act 2000. In practice, however, all local authorities need to appoint a councillor. So am I saying, should that be a leader, or is that right? Because I'm reading it.
Councillor to hold the most.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's essentially.
The leader's
that's
not
it.
going to be not a councillor.
Yeah.
Those are the
A councillor to hold the lead. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm reading it. I was close to saying it wrong. Okay, thank you.
Right. Councillor Mack.
I would like to totally agree with Councillor Beech's point as someone who is double vice chair of committees. And there might be a point. There might be a point about specifically adding into the chair's role description about how they consult with the vice chair. They have the onus to do that consultation with the vice chair, as Councillor Gollop does very conveniently for me and puts in the effort. So rather than expecting me to be everywhere. And then I wanted to add something to the councillor duties and responsibilities. There's a phrase that I use a lot. It is, although we don't have roles at the moment, it is written somewhere on our website that councillors have a role in building or increasing community cohesion. And it's a phrase that I've really, really appreciated and sort of shapes a lot of the people aren't getting on. So potentially you could say act as a community champion and encourage community cohesion in the ward. It's a phrase that I often use outwardly because it helps with how to resolve issues. So.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Cool. Councillor Courtney.
Thanks, Chair. 2 quick things. One is something that occurred to me as I was reading through this is that obviously that a huge amount of cross-cutting work is going to be required between different committees, and there is something around the public sector equality institution where I don't feel fulfilling the statutory locally determined requirements of an elected member might cut it. As in, it's perfectly possible to have individual committees paying due regard. The case I'm thinking of specifically that leapt out at me was one of the roles of the chair of the Public Safety Protection Committee is in liaison with Bristol Disability Forum around things like taxi ranks, but also very often as the rep from the council on that committee, you become aware of an awful lot of issues faced by disabled people, for example, better needs around transport. Those equalities considerations need to be built into the work in whichever group is dealing with transport. I think there needs to be something in here under duties and responsibilities that reflect the council's obligation to not only pay due regard to, but to ensure other committees, councillors, everyone else as well, collectively.
Yeah, so where's your suggestion go then? Is it in the roles and responsibilities of a chair, or would it be
No, I think
for
it's something that
all,
will be incumbent on all councillors, but
councillors?
I would strongly just, if this is a principle which the committee agrees, that we just delegate the wording of that to Tim, because it might have to be quite legally tidy at times.
Yeah.
I've got 2 suggestions, Chair. One is to have a very short, pithy line that says, to uphold the public sector equality duty, but I don't think that perhaps goes as far as perhaps it should. But actually the sentiment is in the member code of conduct, and it's in section 2.2, and it says dealing with representations or inquiries from all residents within our communities and visitors fairly, appropriately and impartially and not discriminating against people on the grounds of, and then it lists the protected characteristics. And I think there's somewhere between the two that I think we could
put into that top.
appropriately reflect in as maybe a number 9 in all councillors' responsibilities. It's not dissimilar to what's in the code of conduct, so it won't be anything new. But it brings it up.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Thank you. And the other thing was just to raise a little bit of a concern about something that sounds really nice and might be really difficult. Under item 4, to act as a community champion for their ward, this will include blah, 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 blah. All councillors must provide a voice and advice for local individuals and interest groups in their dealings with the council. Now, I say this as someone who represented what was a resident, but was in many ways the headquarters of the far right of Bristol in my ward for some time. I would have absolutely no intention of helping or advising them on their dealings with the council if I can possibly avoid it. I would not want there to be any potential sanction against a councillor for refusing to help a resident who held or wished to influence council policy in an entirely objectionable manner. There are other channels to ensure equality of access, but I don't feel elected representatives should be any of them.
Okay. So I think instead of must, maybe we should change it to should, or do. Yeah, because there's certainly some incumbency on us where we are morally compelled to do that community championing work. But I also agree that like the way it's phrased makes it sound like you can get told off if you don't do it.
So perhaps we move the words where appropriate.
Yeah.
Further in the sentence.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Something like that.
After,
So
in
basically,
addition, where
the
appropriate.
action is for the officers to fix that with that in mind. I've got.
Sorry, as a proposal on that, because I'm not quite. I mean, would there be something about taking out the word voice, but to keep advise? I feel uncomfortable to say that there's anything that we wouldn't talk to about how to interact with. So I think there's a difference between advising and voicing. And I really sympathise, and I've had a situation last week where I've got something in my wall, so I really sympathise, but I do think that our elected role is to be someone, because we might all believe that we have really fair and rational views on who should be engaging with the council and who shouldn't, but there might be people who are elected that we didn't think had that, but we would still be expecting them to listen to their residents. You get voted in with 30% of the vote, and 50% of the vote really are opposed to you. But I just wonder if it was only advise and not voice, whether that would be, people would be comfortable with that.
Yes, I think so. Well, I think that basically we're going to have to take that point away and rephrase it. Councillor Holland.
It was a point, I know that you talked about the disability voice, particularly, and I don't want to steal Jeff's thunder, but in the whichever meeting it is where we're going to be looking at that engagement with what are currently the mayoral commissions, outside bodies, etc. I mean, one of the things that we have got to think about is how those what are currently commissions are able to influence any bit of policy that they want to. Some of us who were around before will remember that at one time we had additional members, didn't we, sitting on scrutiny committees representing policies. So those will be the kinds of things that we'll discuss then. I don't think that we should be prescriptive now about how we make sure that the voice of disabled people alter. And then on Heather's point, I think it is the fine line between advice, isn't it? I mean, we've all had, I'm sure, people making representations. I don't sit on DC anymore, so I can say this. Making representations about planning applications where you might not agree with what the person is saying, but you can tell them how to make public forum statements and all the rest of it. you can't pick and choose who you represent in once you've been elected, can you?
Yeah, I think that's all fair. Right, final point is something about scrutiny. Do we want to add any specific mention of scrutiny to the duties of councillors? I think there's probably somewhere in here that would fit.
It's your policy development.
Yeah, I think in the policy development, yeah, just like, I think just putting that one word in, because it is part, like, you can't take a good decision without scrutinising your thinking. Like, it's obvious, and I guess it might as well be put in. But Jeff?
There's a lot of hang-up from quite a lot of members and in public forum on the word scrutiny. And, you know, I can't... Well, I think Steve and I, from our roles in scrutiny, both know the importance of scrutiny. But actually, go back to what I said earlier, it's scrutiny and decision-making are actually different things. And I think we confuse the situation by mentioning it now. It implies that we make decisions by scrutinising the way Scrutiny Commission scrutiny. That isn't enough. That is not enough. With scrutiny, we're told answers to the questions we ask. When we're making decisions, we have to have all the information that Cabinet currently have in making the decisions. So I really want us to use any word but scrutiny, because I think it is misleading and it's suggesting something. It hasn't worked as well as it should have worked if we're expecting people to make decisions. So that's why I feel we're changing the role. We are expecting members to actually be involved in making the decision. And if I'm on one of those committees, I'll be asking the questions that I would expect to
I
ask.
suppose the question is
is
it scrutiny, capital S, or lowercase s? And I think you're like, oh, I don't want the capital S scrutiny to be in
No,
there.
what I'm saying is because if you use it with either a capital or a small s,
it's
people
still
will take
confusing.
it to mean scrutiny as we know it,
And
it's not.
I think I was behaving as though it was a small case S. Gary? And
Yeah, well, if we replace it with examine and challenge, then basically you're fulfilling your role as a ward councillor, seeing what the council is actually doing and examining and challenging that and reporting back to the residents.
Yeah, all right, examining and challenging. So we put that phraseology. We're all happy with that?
Yeah.
Right, examining and challenging. Great. That's the action. Okay, does anyone have anything else to say about anything? Or can we go to lunch? No.
Work program.
Yeah, final thing is to note is the work programme.
We're actually going to vote on that.
Oh,
so we might as well
sorry, yeah, let's do a vote. Is pending the minor updates which we've suggested, is everyone happy with the rest of these definitions?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, yes. That's unanimous. Okay. I sort of took it as read, but no one had suggested we should throw them all out. So, yeah.
Chair, can I just mention one point that I've already raised from Tim when I was looking at this, and it emphasises the role of leader. It did lead me to the question of what happens between the day Marvin resigns and the council annual meeting as to who has the political lead. I don't expect an answer to that now, but given in WACA we have a really strange challenge that WACA is incapable of making any political decision between the 5th of May and the 16th of June. And I would not want Bristol to be in that situation, and therefore can we actually ask Chairman Lucy to look at that and look at some wording that will identify someone who takes that political role immediately after the election.
All right. Yeah.
I think
Well, no, let's just say yes.
because they deal with it Potentially they're going to be dealing with next Thursday, and a bunch of councils that are going to change control.
Right. That's agreed. Guy.
Just a quick observation as well.
Next
When
to
one
please.
takes into account the pre-election period, that's quite a long period of time, potentially supposed to be ambiguity, so certainty would be very welcome. I wanted to check, just because every meeting, my concern about this goes up, when are we talking about escalation power and how that's going to work?
Okay.
In terms of the work programme,
In July, we will be deciding the rest of our work programme, but I do think it's probably one of the highest priority things.
Okay. As long as it's on radar, that's great.
Yeah, it's definitely on the radar because it's it's a pretty key thing. Okay, right.
It's not on the to be scheduled list though.
Okay,
You've got
So,
a list of
Yeah,
items
just
to
in the
negotiate.
paperwork, it's
Yeah.
not listed there.
that's okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
In line of